Borthakur IAS Academy. Prostuti aru adhyayoner nirbhorjogyo thikona. Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 13th July 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. In a blow to Oli, Nepal Supreme Court directs Duba to be appointed Prime Minister. In what would be considered as an end to the constitutional crisis that was brewing in Nepal for the last 1.5 years, finally the Supreme Court of Nepal has put an end to it, or at least started the proceedings to put an end to the constitutional crisis. Remember, during the current crisis, there was a talk in certain sections of the civil society in Nepal itself that Nepal might slide out of democracy altogether and become some sort of a zombie state. But nonetheless, democracy prevailed and the rights of the people are being respected. In the sense that if you look at the timeline, this all started in December of 2020 when there was a clear rift that was happening in the Nepal Communist Party, which was being led by Mr. Sharma. Now, on his recommendations to the President of Nepal, the parliament was dissolved. Now, in February 23, 2021, that decision was challenged by the opposite faction of the Nepal Communist Party and the opposition parties. During that hearing, during that petition, the Supreme Court reversed the decision of President, meaning the Supreme Court of Nepal decided that whatever the action taken by the President of Nepal on the request of Mr. Sharma, in February of 2021, the Supreme Court of Nepal held that the decision taken by the President of Nepal on the dissolution of Parliament is not right and reinstated the Parliament, House of Representatives. So in May 10th, Mr. Sharma lost confidence vote after the Parliament was finally reconstituted. Now he again advised the President to dissolve the Parliament and hold new elections by saying no party has majority to form a new government. Since he initiated those proceedings second time, he became the caretaker Prime Minister and he was hoping to go for a snap election. Now again in May of 24, after his loss of confidence or vote of confidence in the Parliament, which was reconstituted by the Supreme Court, since the proceedings again were initiated to dissolve the House of Representatives, the opposition party moved to the Supreme Court again asking for relief. Now finally, on July 12th of 2021, the Supreme Court ordered Parliament to be reconvened and the opposition leader Sher Bahadur Duba to be appointed as Prime Minister. Now Mr. Duba is not new to the Prime Ministership. He has already been he already served as Prime Minister of Nepal for 4 consecutive terms. It started in 1995 and it ended in 2018, I think. 2018 is his short period where he served for 1 year and he is currently the leader of opposition. Now, what does this entail? It entails that whatever the decision taken by the President of Nepal is unconstitutional according to the words of the Supreme Court of Nepal, and the House of Representatives must be reconstituted and reconvened to elect a new Prime Minister that happens to be the member of opposition right now or leader of opposition. So this is certainly a welcome step in the sense that certain norms that were being violated are set right now. As far as what impact it would have on India, we have to wait and see until this process is done. We know ties have been at their lowest recently due to various conditions between both India and Nepal. And on top of it, there were certain sections of the Nepalese political spectrum and civilian society that was accusing India that whatever the instability that Nepal is seeing is because of India. But nonetheless, we remained silent. We let things play out. It was the Chinese envoy who made multiple trips to various political headquarters in Nepal and to China to club the both factions of Nepal Communist Party and it was the India who standed on the sidelines just watching the proceedings. It did not even comment saying that we are making certain observations. Apart from that, India did not interfere. So that seems to be an end to the turmoil in Nepal. But again, we have to wait and see. So moving on to the next article, inflation remains above 6% in June. Now, the current inflation rate is touching a 6-month high of 6.26. But this is not as high as of what was recorded in May of this year, which was 6.3. But nonetheless, this is high. Now, the central banking, that is RBI, had an upper limit of around 6% for inflation, and it seems that the current inflation percentage is higher than what the RBI would be comfortable at. Now, economists who have been following this phenomenon are stating that whatever the inflation percentage that we are seeing is because of lack of a fiscal policy action that would try to cool prices, and this could precipitate a faster unwinding of RBI's growth supporting approach to interest rates. Now, RBI had this stance where they were talking about the inflation would be around 5.1% for 2021 and 2022, and now it seems that they need to relook their strategy. But nonetheless, the main reasons that are attributed is the price of petroleum products and the light inflation that we were hit with, and particularly this has been in the things with the food inflation also, because it flared up from just 2% in April to 5% in May, which is a sharp increase, and led by the 34.8 inflation rate for oils and fats. Again, we are seeing a high inflation in all the domains of the market, and that seems to be playing a huge part in this increase, or having a higher percentage of inflation than what the RBI would have been comfortable with. Moving on to the next article, the power of scrutiny. Now, the Delhi Assembly constituted a committee called Peace and Harmony Committee to study, and it's kind of a fact-finding committee on the subject of Delhi riots of 2020. During its deliberations and investigation, the Peace and Harmony Committee repeatedly summoned Indian Vice President of Facebook. In a bid to get relief, he approached Supreme Court stating that this was a case of simple overreach. The social media platform is governed under the IT Act of the Parliament, and therefore, and also the Delhi law and order came under the central government. Hence, the Delhi Assembly has no jurisdiction to summon him in this case. This was the similar line that was taken up by or repeated by the central government, which again argued that Delhi Assembly had no jurisdiction in this matter. But the Supreme Court of India found it to be contrary, in the sense that in a verdict last week, they upheld the authority of the committee, which was constituted by the Delhi Assembly, to summon anybody from anywhere. In the sense that they upheld that the Delhi Committee, the Peace and Harmony Committee, can summon an official from Facebook, and it is kind of a nuanced judgment in the sense that it recognized the extent of powers of state assemblies in matters regulated by an act of Parliament. Remember, the argument that the Vice President of Facebook India made was that the social media platform, in this case Facebook, is governed by the IT Act of Parliament, that is Lok Sabha, and this is not something that a state government can be concerned with. Now, the court, as I said earlier, found it to be contrary, stating that the state assemblies can make certain decisions related to Act of Parliament. Now, in its decision, it said that the assembly does not only perform the function of legislating, there are many other aspects of governance which can form part of the essential functions of the Legislative Assembly and consequently the committee. It also pointed that the inquisitorial and recommendatory powers of the House can be used for better governance, all while reminding the Delhi Assembly that transgressing into any fields reserved for Union government, meaning though it identified or agreed with the Delhi Assembly's observation that it can actually function in areas of the Parliament, it also said that you must be careful in which fields you choose to transgress. Now we know that there has been a lot of back and forth between the Delhi government and the Union government. Now this is certainly a win in the books for Delhi Assembly, because we know how the new Delhi bill had kind of changed the definition of the government, where earlier definition identified the assembly as the governor and the elected body as the government. Now the act reads the governor as the government. So again, this comes at a time when there has been a lot of back and forth and disagreements between who has the authority in terms of various sectors of the government in Delhi, between central government and state government. Now it also comes at a time when social media platforms are saying that they are just intermediaries and they are not something what the governments are stating them to be. They are simply platform for exchange of ideas without performing any significant role for themselves. Now look at the map right now. WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, various social media platform, digital news media platforms are fighting against the new IT rules. In some cases, few aspects. In other cases, almost all the aspects of IT rule. Against the entire IT Act, they are fighting cases in various high courts. That is why the central government asked the Supreme Court recently to consolidate all the cases that are running in High Court into one bench in Supreme Court. That case is to be heard July 16th. Till that time, we don't know what the Supreme Court is thinking about it. Second, when the Supreme Court says that state assemblies can transgress into acts of parliament, it allowed other states to pursue similar actions against these social media companies. Now what it essentially means is that not only Delhi Assembly, any state assembly, if they deem it to be necessary, they can ask for these social media companies to comply with their committees. That is one thing that we have to understand. Now, the social media company, particularly in this case, tried to escape by saying that we are an intermediary platform. We don't know what happens in the platform. We cannot control what happens in the platform. We don't play a significant role. Now, the court observed that the misinformation of social media has had a direct impact on vast areas of subject matter, which ultimately affects the governance of state. Let us look at the Delhi riots itself. Most of the organizing of Delhi riots happened on the platforms of Twitter and WhatsApp. This is not my saying, this is the FIR stating. The Delhi police filed an FIR in the Delhi riots case, and that is what, or at least some part of it states that majority of the organization of grouping of people for rioting happened on platforms, social media platforms. Now, as I said earlier, this kind of removes constraints on the Delhi Assembly in the sense that there are a lot of ties that prevent Delhi Assembly from acting in the area of law and order because it belongs to the central government controlled by the Home Ministry. The very fact that the Supreme Court found the committee which was constituted by the Delhi Assembly could summon someone from Facebook, and that act does not encroach upon the turf of the central government, meaning the legislative reach of the central government, has actually opened gates for scrutiny for social media platforms by other states. As I said earlier, any state can summon anybody from any social media group if they deem it to be necessary. See, again, if they don't have grounds, if they call, these people will go to the legal recourse and get relief there. But if it is a legal thing which actually conforms to the parameters of the law, then these social media platforms have to conform to it. Now, this, as I said earlier, means many state governments will use this opportunity to have some sort of scrutiny over what the social media companies are doing under the guise of intermediary status. So moving on to the next article, records of freedom fighters to be digitized. In a bid to mark 75 years of independence and in order to celebrate the 𝐎𝐫𝐫 𝐂𝐨𝐫 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, the government decided that, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism decided that they are going to digitize the records of freedom fighters and freedom movement in the coming year. As I said, this is a part of the 𝐎𝐫𝐫 𝐂𝐸𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, and the idea is to digitize all the documents relating to the freedom movement and the freedom fighters who took part in freedom movement that are currently in the possession of National Archives, Delhi. Now again, this is a bit to protect our information in the sense that maybe it will be accessible to wider public in future. Right now, the problem seems to be that whatever the documentation or books or whatever we have in regards to freedom fighters or the freedom movement are so old at this point of time that people cannot access it on a frequent basis. They have to be protected. With the digitized data, it might be open for wider public consumption, which is a good thing. One can actually read upon what our freedom fighters did for us and what was the nuances of Indian freedom movement. Moving on to the next article, Afghan situation to dominate Jaishankar Central Asian visit. Now, Mr. Jaishankar will first attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Ministerial in Dushbin on July 13th and 14th, after he'll travel to Tashkent for a regional connectivity conference on July 15th and 16th. These are the two back-to-back events where the primary focus of the entire event or the grouping meeting will be in regards to Afghanistan. Now, the SCO meeting, which will be a contact group meeting of 8 member states, that is Russia, India, China, Pakistan and Central Asian states, with the Afghan Foreign Ministry, is significant because they are trying to understand what would be the next step that they have to respectively take to support the Afghan government. Remember, they will issue a joint statement in that SCO grouping, and that joint statement is important because it might set the tone for that entire grouping approach towards Afghanistan. Now, as far as the Tashkent meeting, again, it should be noted that again that meeting will also have the primary agenda of Afghanistan, or it will be Afghan-centric discussions and engagement, and again the statement will be of particular importance. So these statements are particularly important because Taliban has stepped up violence in the country. They are claiming more territory day by day. Afghan forces are falling back. Afghan forces are abandoning their positions. Now this precarious situation has led India pulling out its Indian staff from Kandahar consulate on Saturday. That is why Afghanistan will be high on the agenda for Mr. Jaishankar's meeting. If we remember rightly, Afghanistan was the priority when Mr. Jaishankar visited Tehran last week, where he met the interim president or president-elect of Iran, and later on he met his counterpart in Moscow and then went to Georgia. But Georgia was a different thing. Tehran and Moscow, that is Iran and Russia, were primarily focused on Afghan. That is those two high-profile engagements with respective counterparts there and the president-elect there. Now in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where we are meeting 8 other foreign ministers or the grouping members, with the Afghan Foreign Ministry in attendance, will certainly ensure that the agenda or the tone for the response from these groupings, and this thing is set. Based on the statement that we see, India will appropriately formulate its own policy. But nonetheless, this is significant given the current situation that is developing in Afghanistan. Moving on to the next article, top US general in Afghanistan, Scott Miller, relinquishes post. Now, the top commander of US forces in Afghanistan has relinquished his position in a ceremony in Kabul. Now, this is the final step, or one of the few final steps that would bring US closer to ending its 20-year war in Afghanistan. This ceremony took place at a time where the territory controlled by Taliban has been higher than ever before. The violence in Afghanistan, or the level of violence in Afghanistan, has been at its highest, and the desertion of forces, Afghan national forces, has been at its highest. Now, a new 4-star general will assume the authority to lead the US forces or lead the US response. The idea is that till the final pullout is done by or concluded by August 31st, the Americans are going to provide air support to Afghan security forces. After that, we don't know what will be the situation. The only concrete thing we know for sure is both US and NATO are going to leave residual troops to train the Afghan national forces. Apart from that, nothing more. The Afghan National Defense and Security Forces are mostly funded by US and NATO. They have been successfully putting up certain resistance in certain areas, but in large cases, they have been abandoning their posts. The Afghan government had no other option but to send special forces to augment their front lines, but that is not a final solution. Now, this is the current situation in Afghanistan. Moving on to the next article, China says it drove away US warship. Now, China's military has said that they have driven away a US warship that illegally entered Chinese waters near the Parcel Islands on Monday. Remember, the Parcel Islands are in the South China Sea, and this has been the reclaimed islands that China constructed in South China Sea against international court rulings. Now, on July 12th of 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague ruled that China had no historic title over the South China Sea. Irrespective of this, China went ahead and built Parcel, Sparsely and other such islands, and is now claiming territory around those islands and has been harassing its neighbors through military coercion and through its coast guard. There is a lot of trouble brewing in South China Sea, and to prevent China from taking over major sea routes or shipping routes in that area, the US Navy has been conducting freedom of navigation operations. Now, freedom of navigation operations include upholding the international laws of the sea, UNCLOS laws, right? US has been conducting this. The Chinese have been trying to coerce US to prevent doing such operations, but nonetheless US has been carrying out. Remember, a few months back, US asked India to participate in similar operations. Not only India, Japan and Australia also, through the Quad grouping, but 3 of the countries declined, stating their own reasons. But nonetheless, this is something that India could possibly participate in the future. Now, these islands, right, these are islands that were largely underwater, but through reclamation process, China was able to build huge islands in middle of South China Sea, and not only reclaimed the territory, but heavily militarized those reclaimed islands. Remember, reclaimed islands, they are not islands. They used to be reefs, which were major portion of them used to be underwater, but through reclamation process, China built huge islands and has heavily militarized them. They built hangars, they built radar stations, they built runways, they built military installations. They started they posted anti-aircraft technology missiles there. If you see the satellite photos, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now this was done entirely against the international laws. Right? International law states that anybody can move freely in international waters, and China has no claim in South China Sea, but they are entirely claiming the South China Sea. Now this is the problem with South China Sea. This is very much developing because the 9-dash line thing that China has adopted is wreaking havoc on other countries like Malaysia, Philippines, and there is a lot of fighting going on regarding this in Vietnam also, because it is actually China is actually threatening fishing vessels from all these countries who are navigating in those waters for fishing, stating that this is Chinese territory and Chinese waters, and these countries fishing vessels cannot enter them, and has actually sunk a few vessels of Vietnam, fishing vessels, and has arrested so many people from other countries also, fishermen, primarily fishermen, has seized shipping vessels from these countries. So the South China Sea is pretty much accurate, and in order to bolster these nations' claims in those countries, US Navy has been frequently conducting freedom of navigation operations. But China is claiming that they have driven up a warship. Again, Chinese rhetoric. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
Borthakur IAS Academy.